everyone. Today we are going to start looking at the law of cosines. So this one, similar to law of sines, is used to solve oblique triangles, meaning that there are no right angles in this triangle. There's two different situations where you might have to use the law of cosines. So when you're given two sides and the included angle, so the angle in between those two sides, that's SAS, or if you're given all three sides, SSS. So here are my law of cosines. There's three different ones depending on which side or which angle you are looking for. So if you are looking for side A or angle A, you're going to use that top one. If you're looking for side B or angle B, you're going to use that one in the middle. Or if you're looking for side C or angle C, you'll use that third one. And they all pretty much have the same format. It just changes letters every once in a while. So a squared is equal to b squared plus c squared minus 2bc times the cosine of a. And then it just changes letters as we go on. So these are the formulas that we're going to be using to answer our questions. Our first example, we're going to find the side length and we're going to round to the nearest tenth. So notice that on this first one, there are no labels, like there's no A, B, and C or anything like that. So feel free to just write in your own labels, and it really doesn't matter which way you go. I'm just going to make this be A, B, C, kind of just go in order. So what they're asking me to find, so right there where the X is at, they're asking me to find little b, because see how this is angle B and across from it is, this is the opposite side, so that has to be side B. So when you look at your formulas, that means that we're going to use that second one here. B squared is equal to A squared plus C squared minus 2AC times the cosine of B. So just so that I don't have to be switching back and forth, I'm going to write that down here. B squared is equal to A squared plus C squared minus 2AC times the cosine of capital B. Okay, so that X, I already labeled it. That's our little b. But what about these two other sides? If you look at these formulas, I need to know what little a and little c are. So if this is capital A, right across, that 28 is going to be little a. And then if this is capital C, straight across, that 16 is going to be little c. So now we're just going to plug in the numbers that we have. So we don't know what b squared is yet. We'll figure that out. But a is 28, so this will be 28 squared plus c is 16. And then just keep filling in as you go along. So right here, that AC means that you multiply, so that's why I use those dot operators. And then times the cosine of capital B, which was 127. So truly from here, once you have it set up, don't try to work this out on your own. Like I am fine with you guys putting this into the calculator. So b squared is equal to, let's type in that long expression. So I have 28 squared plus 16 squared minus 2 times 28 times 16 times cosine of, let me scoot over, 127. So I get this, 1579.2. So I went ahead and wrote that down here. But that's for b squared. If I just want regular b, I'm going to need to go ahead and take the square root of both sides. And remember, we've talked about this. Anytime you take the square root of something, it could be positive, it could be negative. You have to check to see which one will apply. And since we are talking about the length of a triangle, there's no way to have negative length. So it's automatically going to be the positive version of whatever this happens to be. So let's take a look at our calculator again. So now I want the square root of my previous answer here. So here on Desmos, there's one that has A and S. That means answer from above. So that is 39.7. And if I look back to my problem, they are measuring in inches. Okay, so there is my answer. The length of that missing side is 39.7 inches. Okay, let's look at the one right next to it. So here's my new triangle. So again, they don't have anything labeled. So just to make things easier for me, I'm going to label all three vertices. So A, B, and C. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and name the sides. So across from capital A would be little a. Across from capital B is little b. And across from capital C is little c. Okay, so I am looking for this x. Like I want to find the value of that. So when we look at this just happened to be side A for us. So going back to my formulas up here, that's going to be this top one. We're going to use this format. And like before, I don't want to have to be switching back and forth, so I'm just going to write it down here so that we can refer to it. So that formula says that a squared is equal to b squared plus c squared minus 2bc times the cosine of capital A. Okay, so now let's fill in our numbers. We don't know what a squared is, so we're going to leave that alone. But we know that b is 25, so 25 squared. And we know that c is 12, so 12 squared. And then just keep filling this out as you go along. Cosine of capital A, so of 36. And let's do the same as we did before. Let's type in that long expression into the calculator. 25 squared plus 12 squared minus 2 times 25 times 12 times the cosine of 36 degrees. Okay, so I get 283.6. Okay, but that is a squared. I want just normal a. So I am going to have to take the square root of both sides. And like we said before, it's automatically going to be positive because it's length. It has to be a positive number. So back to my calculator. And let's do square root of answer. And that gets me 16.8. So the length of that missing side is 16.8. They are measuring in miles. So 16.8 miles. Okay, so finding a side length, not too bad. The formula is kind of long. You just have to be very careful that you don't make any mistakes when you're plugging stuff in. But other than that, pretty straightforward. Okay, so now how do you use the law of cosines to find an angle measure? So the good thing about law of cosines is that you're only ever going to have quadrant one. It's not like law of sines where you have two different answers you have to check. These are straightforward. You just plug in the numbers and see what you get at the end. Okay, so here, doesn't really matter how you label your diagram. I'm going to make this be A, B, C, like that. And then let's label the sides. Remember, opposite goes together. So this is little a, little b, and then little c. So what we're looking for this x. Now that x happens to be angle C. So when you're looking at your formulas, you want the one that has capital C. So that's at the very bottom. It's this right here. That's my capital C that I'm looking for. So we're going to use this formula. Let me write it down so we don't have to switch back and forth. It says that little c squared is equal to a squared plus b squared minus 2ab cosine of capital C. Okay, so let's fill this out. Little c is 10. Little a is 13. Little b is 11. And just keep filling out as we go along. Now we don't know what capital C is, so we're going to have to leave it like that. Okay, well, before we type anything in, I'm solving for C. I'm going to highlight it so it's just easier to see. I know that I am done when that C is all by itself. So let's rearrange everything first before we type it into the calculator. Okay, so here's what we would do. That 13 squared and that 11 squared, those are the first things that you're going to want to move over. And right now, since they're both positive, like there's nothing in front of the 13, and then that 11 has a plus sign, we are going to move them over by subtracting. So on the left, I still have my 10 squared, but now I have minus 13 squared minus 11 squared equals negative 2 times 13 times 11 cosine capital C. So see that? Just these two terms got moved over, turned negative. Okay, cosine C is still not by itself. So this negative 2 times 13 times 11, all of these numbers are being multiplied. So in order to move them over, we're going to have to divide. Divide by negative 2 times 13 times 11. All three of those would cancel out. But I have to do the same thing to the other side. Okay, last but not least, this is cosine C. I want it to just be C. I don't want the cosine in front of it. So whenever you move cosine to the other side of the equal sign, it becomes a cosine inverse. So I'm going to do a couple things at once. You know what I like? Let's just do the one. So let's move that cosine inverse over. Sorry, I'm running out of space, so I'm going to try to write it down here. Cosine inverse of this entire expression. So I'm going to just rewrite it the way it looks right now. 10 squared minus 13 squared minus 11 squared all over negative 2 times 13 times 11. And that whole mess just equals the letter C. See that? So I know it's kind of a lot to work with. You're going to have to double check all your arithmetic, all your adding, subtracting, negative signs, positive signs. But once you're able to isolate the C, it's just a calculator problem. Plug it into the calculator. So I'm going to say C equals, and now let's type this in. So I'm going to put this to the side so I can see what I'm doing when I have my calculator up. So cosine inverse of 10 squared minus 13 squared minus 11 squared over negative 2 times 13 times 11. Okay, and there we get 48.4. So the measure of that angle is 48, oops, let me move to my pen, 48.4 degrees. Ooh, so that was a long one. Had a lot of steps, but not too bad. Okay, let's do that last one that's there. It's the same deal. There's no labels on this triangle, so we're going to have to do that for ourselves. Let's say A, B, C. Okay, now let's label the sides. So then 18 would be little a, 30 would be little b, and then 17 would be little c. So we want to solve for this x that's right here, which just so happens the way I labeled my triangle happens to be angle C all over again. That was a coincidence. I didn't mean for that to happen. But that just means I'm going to use the same formula from over here. So let's rewrite that. Yeah, let's rewrite that. So little c squared is a squared plus b squared minus 2ab cosine of capital C. Now let's fill in our numbers. C is 17. So that'll be 17 squared equals 18 squared plus 30 squared minus 2 times 18 times 30 times the cosine of capital C. Okay, so first thing is these first two terms. We're going to subtract them over to the other side. And then everything else stays the same, so I'm just rewriting. Okay, and now these three terms are multiplying, so we're going to divide them over to the other side. Cancel, 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 cancel. And then last thing is it's cosine C, and I just need regular C. So this cosine, once I move it across the equal sign, becomes cosine inverse. And that will all equal C. That's a capital C. Let me write it bigger. That will equal C. So now, calculator again, our handy dandy calculator. So let's move this to the side, and I'm going to write my answers down here. Let's figure out what C should equal. Cosine inverse of 17 squared minus 18 squared minus 30 squared. All over negative 2 times 18 times 30. Okay, and we're rounding to the nearest tenth. So this would just be 30 degrees because that 0.3 just rounds down. So it's going to be a whole number, 30 degrees. Okay, so that's finding an angle measure. So still the same formula, still plugging in. It's just that when you're isolating that angle, you're going to have to do that cosine inverse. But just be very careful with your arithmetic and with your adding, subtracting, positive numbers, negative numbers, all that stuff. And you will be fine because after that, it's a calculator problem. Okay, so this is the law of cosines. A little longer formula, but in my opinion, a little bit easier than law of sines. Make sure that you know how to work this formula because tomorrow we will be practicing both law of sines and law of cosines. All right, guys, let me know if you have any questions. See you tomorrow.